Hello everyone, welcome to the second video in this series about firearm safety. If you haven't watched the first one, you should watch it before you watch this one. There will be some terminology that will be used that you may not understand unless you watch the first video. But this one is focused specifically on safety. And we're going to talk about safety in terms of 3 safety rules. I like 3 rules because almost anybody can memorize 3 rules. Most people can't memorize 10 or sometimes even 5, but most people can handle 3. So that's what we're going to use. And these are the 3 rules that the Boy Scouts of America uses, and they seem to work pretty darn good. Just to give you an example of some of the problems that I've found with the longer lists, I found lists that are 10 rules or longer, and I think they can all be covered by the 3, and I'll give you an example. For example, in the longer list, one of the rules you'll sometimes see is don't point a gun at anything you don't intend to shoot. That rule breaks down pretty quickly, simply because the gun always has to be pointed somewhere. And most of the things that it's pointed at are things you don't intend to shoot. Um, we'll talk about a rule that actually is more general and doesn't break down like that. Another example is you'll sometimes see in some lists of rules the statement that treat every gun as if it were loaded. And that rule breaks down at times too, because there are things you just wouldn't do with a loaded gun. For example, you wouldn't put a loaded gun away in a cabinet, or you wouldn't put a loaded gun into a vehicle. In fact, that's against the law. Or you wouldn't clean a loaded gun. So the statement that you should treat every gun as if it were loaded just doesn't hold true all the time. And then another rule that you will hear sometimes in a longer list of rules is be sure of your target and what's behind it. And we're going to cover that in one of our 3 rules, and you'll find that these 3 rules cover just about everything in one way or another. And if you learn them and follow them, your chances of causing a firearms accident are extremely, extremely rare. Okay? So, as I said, anybody can memorize 3 rules, and we want those of you who are going to go shooting with us to make sure that you take the time to memorize those 3 rules. I'm going to use this handgun to illustrate the 3 rules, and we'll start with rule number 1, which is always keep the muzzle of the gun pointed in a safe direction. And a safe direction varies with the circumstances. For example, if you're at a shooting range, the safest direction is generally downrange. And those who are overseeing the shooting activity, the safety people, the instructors, will generally teach you that to keep the gun pointed downrange throughout the shooting activity. If you're hunting, it would generally be up in the air or at the ground. Those are generally considered the safest directions under those circumstances. But the purpose of rule number 1 is simply to teach you to be aware of where the muzzle of the gun is pointing at all times, and to just get in the habit, develop the instinct for thinking about that and making sure that wherever it's pointed, it is in a direction that would not cause great damage or harm if the gun were to discharge accidentally. And that's a good habit to get in with any gun, whether it's loaded or unloaded, simply because it develops that important habit. So again, rule number 1 is always keep the muzzle of the gun pointed in a safe direction. Rule number 2 is keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Now this might seem kind of obvious, but instinctively when most people pick up a gun, they will pick it up with the finger on the trigger. That's a habit you need to make sure you don't develop, or if you have, you need to break that habit. You need to get in the habit of picking up a gun by the grip only, not putting a finger on the trigger. It's okay to put a finger here if you like. That puts it closer to the trigger, so my preference is to keep it away from the trigger. As you pick up the gun, you're getting ready to fire. It's okay to put your finger up alongside the trigger, but only when you have your sight picture and you're actually looking at what you intend to fire at should your finger go to the trigger. Other than that, just keep your finger away from the trigger all the time. All right, and rule number 3 is to keep the gun unloaded until you're ready to use it. Now this can be more complex than it sounds. It sounds pretty obvious, but a lot of firearms accidents, in fact probably most firearms accidents, are caused by guns that were thought to be unloaded. And I'll show you why that is. This gun has a removable magazine that holds 13 rounds of ammunition. And it's very easy to remove that magazine. I'm going to install it. Okay, and now I'm going to remove it. I'll push the magazine release and the magazine comes out. The gun is now unloaded. Or is it? There's actually one other place in the gun where ammunition can be found, and that's in the firing chamber at the breech end of the barrel. So I'm going to open up this gun. We're going to look inside. Okay. I'll use a flashlight to show you the firing chamber at the back of the barrel. And the gun is not unloaded unless the chamber is also empty, as well as the magazine being empty. I'm going to show you what you might find. This is a fired cartridge, or fired case, so it's not a loaded cartridge. I'm going to put that into the firing chamber. Use the flashlight again so you can see it. If you open a gun, if you open the action of a gun and you see that, the gun is still loaded, even if the magazine is removed. That is the single biggest cause of accidental shootings, is simply removing or emptying the magazine of the gun and not opening the gun to make sure there's nothing in the chamber. I personally know of 3 people who have been killed because of that reason. They thought the gun was empty, and it was, except for the chamber. There was 1 round in the chamber, and that round proved fatal. So when it comes to this specific rule, the way that should apply is when you load a gun, it should be only when you're ready to use it. When you're through using it, you should unload it, removing both the magazine and checking the chamber and removing a round, if there is a round in the chamber. And when you pick up a gun that is not familiar to you, if someone hands you a gun, you should take those same actions and make sure that both the magazine and the chamber are empty. If people learned how to do that, gun accidents would become very, very rare. So those are the 3 safety rules. And again, those 3, if you look at them, you'll find that they cover pretty much all circumstances. And anyone who memorizes and strictly observes those rules is extremely unlikely to ever cause a firearms accident. So first one, keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Second one, keep your finger off the trigger till you're ready to shoot. And the third one, keep the gun unloaded, both the magazine and the chamber, until you're ready to use it. Thanks for watching, and go on to the next video, actually the next dozen or so videos, which are about specific firearms. There will also be a video in there, and I think that will actually be the next one, that will talk about choosing your dominant eye with which to shoot. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.